Go straight on.
But yeah, it's. I mean, again, it's been a job of a lifetime. Um, the people on it have become some of my closest friends.
Get ready to
As ever, I've never laughed as much as I do on Line of Duty as I do on anything else. But again, he's just blown us all away. And what I think to me was quite evident reading it was the first series three is my favourite. And I think on when we were on BBC Two, we could be a lot more subtle and sort of got this little cult following. And all the drama was in these interview scenes and in the dark alleys. It wasn't, OCGs and machine guns and all that stuff. And when we moved to BBC One and you're at Sunday night prime time, you do need to hit that bigger audience. You need these bigger set pieces and all that's going on. And I loved 4 and 5. But I feel now that we're established there, we can go back to what we were best at. And I really feel, 1 and 2, really good episodes, strong build, but I think Eps 3 and 4 could be the best he's ever written.
Oof. Wow. Okay, that was Martin Compston. And Scott, you recorded a really nice 40-minute interview with him that we're going to put out on the Must Watch podcast stream as a special episode. So if you want to hear that, make sure you subscribe to Must Watch on the BBC Sounds app. So, is The Nest any good, Hayley?
I loved this. I thought it was such an unusual premise for a thriller because the stakes are always higher when you bring a baby into a situation, and there's such a sad, visceral desperation around infertility, especially. It's such a world-shattering heartbreak that it makes for perfect grounds for doing something rash and possibly unwise like what these two have done. And I thought that the fights between the couple, her blinkered need for this baby, even though she's smart enough to know that it's risky, and his desperation to make her happy, given everything she's been through physically and mentally, all the IVF treatments, all the miscarriages. I thought that in this show there is something real and human here emotionally, and I thought it was done incredibly well. And also, I thought it's got James Harkness in it, who's fast becoming one of my favorite actors. He has a supporting role in this show as a social worker, but you might remember him from The Victim a while back. And there's a lot about this show that I liked about The Victim as well. It has that same sort of ambiguousness, the same foreboding, and it's got James Harkness. So if you like this, which I think you will because it's great, you should go and check out The Victim on iPlayer as well.
Scott?
The really interesting thing is that Martin said during that interview that, essentially when you start watching it, you think it's going to go in one way and then it ends up going in a completely different one. So without being too spoilerific, for next week, you think that the current setup about essentially whether Kaya, one of the characters, is, essentially the person that she's being portrayed to be. And then you think that's going to be the dynamic for the rest of the series, a sort of is she good, is she bad? But then with episode 2, which is coming up next Sunday on BBC One, it goes in a completely different trajectory. All of the things that you were being expecting to be the main themes of this series in your own head, where you see it logically going, doesn't end up being. And I find that so exciting. I started to watch the second episode and I was thinking to myself, is this going to be just a continuation of where they were before? And at the end of it, I had no idea genuinely where it was going to go from that point onwards. And I think to somebody to take the normal conventions of what you would think to be just a family, not a family drama, but a drama about families, goes against every grain of what you are normally comfortable with, is so exciting. So for me, I'm really excited about where the series goes.
Okay, is it a must-watch, Scott?
It is! You know it is!
Hayley, is it a must-watch?
Yes, we don't need to do this bit. It's obviously a must-watch.
I know, I thought... blackening my own soul by asking that question. The Nest started on BBC One
Love it.
on Sunday, March 22nd, so you can already catch up on part 1 of it on iPlayer, and it is most definitely a resounding must-watch. Here, okay, download. Very important download. It has taken on a new significance since more and more people are having to self-isolate and thus having more time to binge on TV shows. I've been watching Fargo, the TV series.
I love that
So
show.
good.
Oh, it's so good, isn't it? Billy Bob Thornton, is that right?
Yeah.
Is just so terrifying in it.
It is quite a bleak show, though.
It's
Is
really
it something
bleak.
that you can still get into when the mood is still a bit bleak, generally? Because I'm really wanting at the moment distractionary nonsense rather
Right.
than something that's really dark. Because if everything already feels a bit like that, you don't want to have more of that stuff. If that makes sense.
That's a good. I've been just watching clips of Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister.
Yes, me
on
too.
YouTube.
I was trying to find somewhere for it to stream because I think we should all be watching that right now,
I
and it's
agree.
nowhere.
Is that right? You can't.
I can't find it anywhere.
So
It might be on BritBox, because normally if you can't find something, it's normally on BritBox. It's not necessarily the greatest advert
yeah,
for the
that's not
service.
much of an advert,
Yeah.
but just watching those 3 or 4 minute clips on YouTube have given me so much pleasure.
Yeah.
Over the last thing. Apparently, I've just been told by producer Tom it is on BritBox.
Yeah,
There we go.
There you go. If you want to go and check that out, anything comedy. I have also been looking at clips on YouTube of comedy roasts.
Oh, yes.
Comedy Central comedy roasts, which are good. I think Rob Lowe is a particularly good one, very strong. As is the Justin Bieber one. You may not be a fan of Justin Bieber, but my gosh, the roast. Woo, is good, and I would highly recommend if you want to be laughing with really dark humour is Anthony Jeselnik comedy special on Netflix, which is Anthony Jeselnik is the darkest comedian I think I've ever heard in my life, and what a way. I mean, look, I know Hayley, you know this world very, very well, but the way he constructs a joke is just effortless. And
Yeah, I
Brilliant.
haven't watched that special yet, but I will get to it.
It just, I can't wait until you've seen it and then you can tell me what you think of it. It's
Okay,
dark
I'll have it.
as anything. Yeah.
Meanwhile, on Netflix, I was watching Tiger King, which is the one that everybody's talking about on Twitter right now.
Oh, I started watching
it's,
that. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
so
Okay,
this
go
is
on.
a 7-part documentary on Netflix that will make you think the world is crazy and therefore you should stay in. So this is sort of a medicinal thing as well. I don't really know where to start with this one, so maybe I'll do a weird fact. Did you know that there are more privately owned tigers in America than exist in the wild in the rest of the world?
That
There are
means-
5,000 big cats in American backyards compared to over 3,000 wild. And the people who own them are mad people who hate each other and pay to have each other killed. So this is one of, I can't really tell you much more about this show because it's one of those that gets madder with every episode. But as an example of how mad this story is, the real life inspiration for Al Pacino's character in Scarface is in this. As in, the guy Scarface is based on is also a big cat owner. He used to smuggle cocaine into America, sewn into live snakes. He gets about 10 minutes of screen time because he's not as interesting as the rest of the lunatics.
He's not the weirdest person in this.
Yeah, they breeze over him. They go,
What
he
is
exists,
wrong
and then they
with
move
him?
on.
What is wrong with these people? you watch
I love
this. The Tiger King Joe Exotic is not. If anyone wrote this character down, no one would commission this. Everyone would go, "There's no way a guy could be."
It would
this
sound
bad."
too mad.
Yeah.
And each of them has their own brand of madness.
Yes.
And I thought it was nuts and well worth your time. And if you were a fan of the podcast S-Town that came out a few years ago, this sort of has the same vibe. So, you
I
know,
don't know that podcast, but
have a look at that one.
yeah, Tiger King is. I started watching this and thought, what is wrong with these people?
And their
Why
haircuts.
do-
What is wrong with
yes.
these people's haircuts?
Yeah, there are a lot of mullets. There are a lot of mullets, which
A lot of
says
mullets
don't
and
get a mullet.
strange facial hair.
Yeah, and earrings and tattoos and bizarre clothing and this.
A lot of neck tattoos. attitude,
And this-
specifically.
Yeah, which I'm thinking of getting myself, but I've now been put off from after watching this. But why they want to keep these beautiful animals like this? Their obsession.
Well, all of them seem to collect partners as well as cats and cars. They seem to be collectors of stuff.
Yeah, it's
There's
bizarre.
so much going on here mentally that
Yes.
I thought it was extraordinary. So go watch it on Netflix.
I'll just say to Nikki Campbell, who of course co-presents Breakfast here on 5 Live and is a huge animal rights fan, and especially he's a dog lover, he's an animal lover. Don't watch it. It will wind you up so badly. Just don't watch it.
Is it a must watch, Nikki? No.
No, not for you, Nikki Campbell. It's not a must-watch. Netflix Tiger King, it really isn't, because it will really massively wind you up. That's all we've got time for today. Scott and Hayley, thank you so much. As always, must-watch. Brilliant with the pair of you. Okay, now it's time for Drive with Anna and Tony.
Nihal, thank you. Hello, welcome to Drive. How are you? There is lots in the programme today. We're going to hear from a head teacher about how they've been coping looking after the children of key workers. If you've been homeschooling today, how's it gone so far?
And as far as we're aware at the moment, there won't be a Prime Minister's press conference at 5 o'clock today, but we will expect to hear from him later in the evening.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live. BBC News at 4 o'clock. This is Justine Green. The former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, has been cleared of sexually assaulting 9 women. A jury at Edinburgh High Court found the former SNP leader, who's 65, not guilty of 12 charges. Another charge was not proven. He denied wrongdoing. Outside the court, Mr Salmond welcomed the verdict.
Just over a year ago, when we finished the civil action and judicial review, I said I had great faith in the court system of Scotland. That faith has been much reinforced today. So I'd like to start by explaining that faith and thanking the jury for their decision.
The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has condemned as selfish people who appear to be ignoring the social distancing rules designed to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Mr Hancock said the government would implement more stringent measures if they were deemed necessary to save lives. The Commons is debating emergency legislation in response to the pandemic this afternoon. Helen Ward, who's a professor of public health at Imperial College London, believes tougher action is needed.
We have to stop the pressure on the NHS, and the best way to do that is to have a national lockdown. And I know it's a frightening word, but we absolutely have to stop this non-essential travel, non-essential business and activities, and we have to enforce social distancing.
Health officials in Wales say 4 more people have died after testing positive for coronavirus, bringing the total there to 16. In Scotland, there have been 4 more deaths, meaning 14 people have died. Spain has registered its highest number of deaths in one day from COVID-19. Officials said 462 people had died. Hospitals have been overwhelmed, and the Deputy Prime Minister, Carmen Calvo, is being tested. The Mayor of New York has made a further appeal for more medical equipment, saying many lives could be lost if the city's hospitals run out of resources. Bill de Blasio said hospitals were in dire need of ventilators and called on the federal government to provide millions of masks and additional staff. The train drivers' union ASLEV has called on the government to take action to ensure that only essential workers are using public transport. Some London Underground trains were crowded this morning, with many passengers unable to keep a safe distance from each other. Robert Nisbet from the Rail Delivery Group called on people to consider how important their journeys were.
I think we just all have to follow the government's advice. If you don't need to travel, then please don't. We need to keep those spaces in trains for key workers, such as doctors and nurses who need to get to hospitals. But also we need to concentrate on those freight arteries as well to ensure that supermarket shelves remain well stocked.
And head teachers say parents have heeded calls not to send their children to school unless it's a last resort. Schools, colleges and nurseries across the UK closed their doors on Friday until further notice in an effort to halt the spread of the virus. That's the BBC News. It's 3 minutes past 4.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live, available on the BBC Sounds app. 5 Live Drive with Anna Foster and Tony Livesey.
Hello. Do you know,
Who are you?
Who are you? I'm glad you. I thought you might have lost that. I didn't know if it had fallen so far to the bottom of a dusty drawer that you didn't have. Hello, how are you?
Me? Thank you.
Well, yeah, I know you are. Hello, it's very nice to be back. I haven't got a clue what's going on. Well, I mean here in general.
Yeah, there's a certain story doing the rounds. I think we'll touch on it today.
I think we probably will, once or twice. We've got lots to talk about in the programme. As Tony was saying, we're not expecting the big Boris Johnson press conference at 5 o'clock because he's going to be chairing a Cobra meeting at that time. But we do expect to hear something a bit later. Before we get into all of that, though, minus music, I'm afraid, Orna. Can you still operate without?
Are we on air?
Yes.
I've got 2 messages here, one in my ear and one from you.
I'm expecting. Have we got some trouble?
We have got some.
Oh, good. Go on then.
Yes. Would you like some?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the A1M in Tyne and Wear on the northbound side at Washington at 64. We've got a lane closed on the entry slip road because of an accident. The A1M Doncaster bypass southbound. Another accident is near the M18 at junction 35, so they've closed a lane for that. The M62 eastbound, junction 19 at Haywood to 20 at Rochdale. A lorry's having a tyre change, so there's a lane closed. And the M6 in Warwickshire northbound, they're doing some emergency repairs. They've closed 2 lanes between 1 and 2, so from Rugby towards the M69, you'll find 2 lanes closed. It's down to 1 lane.
Thank you, Orna. So welcome to Drive then. It's
for social distancing.
Do you accept that you may have to use the authorities to tell people what to do, not just to advise them what to do?
Yes, and in fact, on Saturday, I signed the order to give the police the power to be able to shut bars and restaurants and pubs if they're still open.
Well, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has announced 4 more deaths from coronavirus in Scotland and says the illness is accelerating rapidly. A physical assessment centre is going to be set up in every health board area in Scotland, and most of them, they say, will be in place by the end of the day.
Well, elsewhere around Europe, Italy has entered a tougher lockdown with all non-essential businesses closed. More than 2,000 people have now died from the virus in Spain. Canada and Australia have pulled out of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. There are 350,000 confirmed cases worldwide. There have been nearly 15,000 deaths and almost 100,000 people have recovered.
Let's speak to Baroness Nicola Blackwood, who's a former Conservative Health Minister. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Have the government got it right at the moment, relying on people to do this social distancing by themselves?
Well, what was interesting was at the weekend, Mike Ryan, who's the Executive Director of WHO Health Emergencies, he said, we mustn't get too focused on lockdown measures and things like that. What we have to make sure is that there's a comprehensive strategy to respond to COVID, things like social distancing, isolating of the vulnerable, testing, contact tracing, all the things that we are doing. But it is essential, if we are going to do that, that people do listen to the latest advice and that they do comply with it, that they stay at home, that they save lives, that they protect the NHS.
Do people understand the latest advice? Because particularly over the weekend, we've seen people out in parks and public places because they've been told that it's okay to go out for a walk. Does the messaging need to be clearer?
I think it's really important to note that a lot of people, I think the majority of people, are abiding by government advice. They're washing their hands. They are doing their best to change their working patterns, to stay at home. It's a huge change that we're asking people to undertake. And, you know, when I've gone out and about, I've noticed people are making a real effort to give me a wide berth. And so I think people are sort of trying to change their to change their behaviour. But it's clear that they're going to have to do more faster if we are to get on top of this and not go the way of Italy. So that is why the Health Secretary, the Prime Minister have been clear that they don't rule anything out. Emergency legislation will come before the House tomorrow, and if it is necessary, more stricter measures will come in.
The question I was asking though was, is the messaging clear enough? Do people understand what they're being told to do?
I think people do understand that they have to wash their hands. If they get sick, they have to stay home for 7 days. If they live at home alone, if they live with other people,
Baroness Blackwood, I'm so sorry. I'm going to stop you just momentarily because Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, is on his feet in the Commons.
Capability, and we're increasingly using private companies to do the testing and to expand their production of the tests and the execution of the tests, rather than just doing it in the brilliant public health labs that we have at Porton Down and around the NHS. I will give way over there and then behind.
Dave, for giving way and commend what he said about working with the devolved administrations to get the measures in this bill right. I think it's absolutely crucial that many of these measures are on a UK-wide basis. I realise it's unusual times. There's a specific power in Schedule 21 about the ability to limit entry into premises and to necessarily to close down, again applying to all 4 administrations. Can you be clear about whether that will apply to care homes? Because I'm getting a lot of concern from constituents who are worried about some care homes that are still not restricting entry to individuals and therefore putting elderly residents at risk. There's a real demand for this to be unified across the country to protect the elderly residents.
We have other ways to enforce that with care homes, not least contractually through local authorities. I understand his concern, and to making sure that when people are in care homes, then they need to be protected, and many of them shielded from this virus, because many of the most vulnerable people are in care homes. I'll take away the point and to look at whether there's more that needs to be done, but we do have other powers that are available to deliver on what he and I think agree is needed.
And then exit right.
Up here.
Just to let you know, Matt Hancock's taking some interventions there. They're talking about this emergency legislation. He's being questioned by MPs live now in the Commons. Let's carry on listening.
Exit right. But will you tell the House, in the event that the House decides that one element of this Act is working badly, will we be able to amend or strike out that element, or do we have to take the whole thing or reject it at those 6-month points?
They're proposing, as discussed with the opposition, a 6-month debate and vote on the continuation of the bill, and before that debate we will provide evidence and advice from the Chief Medical Officer to inform the debate.
Right.
And there is
And
also
right.
a reporting mechanism for a report every 8 weeks on the use of the powers in the bill.
Right.
I'll give way. Thank you. I'll give way over here and then.
Can I first of all thank my right honourable friend for the time he has taken in explaining every stage that he has used the powers of his office to this House and indeed to the people through the media. I'm hugely grateful, I know many others are. Could I just however state that over the last 3 weeks the world has changed in rather more radical sense than many of us appreciated, and the powers lying within this bill, even over 6 months, are likely to change and are going to be exercised in different ways. Can he assure me that not only he but all other ministers will be exercising their powers and looking at them reasonably in keeping with only the coronavirus issue and making sure that they are limited to the purpose for which they were intended? Because these powers could, in different circumstances, be used in a particularly malicious fashion.
Well, yes, I can confirm that this bill is to deal with the current coronavirus emergency, and that is an important point. But I'd also say that although the world has changed in the past 3 weeks in ways that many couldn't have imagined, every measure that's been taken by the government has been part of the action plan that we published 3 weeks ago. And this bill, which of course has been drafted over an awful long time because it started on the basis of the pandemic flu plan that was standard before coronavirus existed, and then has been worked on over the past 3 months at incredible pace by a brilliant team of officials right across government. This is consistent with the action plan. And so whilst some people might have been surprised by each of the measures we've taken, they have all been part of the plan that we set out right at the start.